for this week here, going from the 18th of November. Yes, so there's been so much activity on the sun, and over the past sort of week, 10 days, 2 weeks, you would have seen a lot of the energy updates and the other videos that we did on this channel here. And it's all about the transformation of things, okay? And the sun everything's really changing at the moment, or it has changed, as it were. And it's a completely different energy environment that we're stepping into now. It is one of the biggest things that's going on with the sun at the moment. And it is formidable more than anything else. So we've had this, this very high active sun over the past few days. I think it's also tied into a 3i Atlas. And there's a certain degree of that as well at the moment, which we will see, because it has been continuously, pushing out a few sun flares in that direction, just making sure that it keeps on its nice, tidy way and it floats out of the solar system. There was talk about it all breaking apart and stuff like that, which I thought that was happening. We'll still sort of see, and it may be such a slow process. And it's probably a better thing that it slowly breaks apart rather than it sort of shatters into loads and loads of pieces. So as we go over the next sort of month, we may notice that it has actually sort of shattered into multitudes of pieces. And this will explain those multitudes of jets that came out of it and the reverse coma, because it's electrically driven, electromagnetically driven. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's got a motor on it, because it's a rock. And it comes from another civilization, comes from another solar system that has been recycled through the universe. And there's a lot of memories attached to the 3i Atlas, but it's certainly not a craft, I think, that's being driven by conscious beings, as it were. Okay, so I think that's just moving on out. And the lessons that came through in the last few weeks, according to that, are absolutely phenomenal. The truths are really coming to the surface. We've seen that a lot. And I think there's a lot of understandings that we need to reassess our understandings of how the universe works. Simply because, we're seeing this comet that comes in from another galaxy, or another universe, or another sort of part of the universe, another part of the galaxy. And, we kind of, as humans, we sit here and kind of go, well, every other part of the galaxy is exactly like this solar system. It's got the same configuration. It's a carbon copy. It's not. And there's different magnetic makeups. The magnetic principles still remain the same, but they could be completely inverted. And this is all to do with that pole shift. And we're going to go into that pole shift later on. And I think if we looked at 3i Atlas, we would understand what the other side of pole shift will look like. If it came through, say, like in 2050, I think it would act like a normal comet. But because it's coming from the other side of the pole shift, it's completely acting like the opposite. But we have seen that in many different sort of comets as well. Anyway, that's enough about AI Atlas. Let's get on to what's really happening in the energy at the moment within our system here at the moment. So the sun over the past week, here it is here. The sun over the past week here, we can see here, this is the X-ray flux. And as you can see on the X-ray flux, there's been a gradual tempering down. And there's even been dropouts of the energies in this section here. And this is the main thing that's going on. When I talk about transition, there is a moment of transitions. And then there's a moment of calm and understanding. And then application of the understanding. And then we can go for another transition, understanding, application of understanding. So there's this wave-like thing that's going on. And the biggest wave of energy that's coming through here at the moment is this, let's put the understanding into place. And to do that, everything has gone into calm mode. The sun has certainly gone into calm mode. We can see here on the magnetic field of the Earth, this is a bit like the aura of the Earth, if you like. It's gradually tapering off in alignment with what's going on the X-ray flux as well. So that's been the sun there at the moment. That's the main things that are playing through on the sun. And I did say a couple of weeks ago that, or last week, that, it's going to reduce the amount of hurricanes and also earthquakes as well, because of that solar flaring it came in, and it really did dip down. I thought it was going to have a bit more of a pickup because there was a corona hole that went through, but that didn't seem to realise more than anything else. Let's just have a quick look at what's been going on in regards to the earthquakes. And as you can see, there's a certain amount that goes on in the western part of the ring of fire, but we also do get quite a lot around the sacrum as well. And the sacrum was really important in the messages from energy over on the Astroflower that you might have seen last week. And it was really important about sort of like finding our place, putting ourselves forward in our own lives, stepping forward in our own lives. And that's where you can see the sacrum, which is up here in Mount Shasta. You got the root chakra, which is down here. And there's been a little bit up by the third eye and the throat chakra in Japan. But one of the things is also very interesting, is which I think it's almost as if like the earth is going back into, okay, the hurricane's over, the transition's over, back to business, back to that pole shift sort of scenario where we're getting more energy that's playing out, which you might well be able to see over here in the earthquakes. You got one over down in Africa, down in Ethiopia, Sudan way, and then one up by Italy and so forth. And that's all to do with that volcanic stuff. And I think that's going to be coming much more back up to the surface. And this is reiterating the idea that the energy is kind of going, okay, understood. Now we're going to physically do and create. So volcanoes create land, they create earth. They create islands and so forth. They have a huge contribution to be made, and a huge contribution to weather, to all the gases that we find within the atmosphere of the Earth. And it is the main contributor to the main gases that we normally talk about. And so there is a little bit of a ringing that's going out towards the heart chakra, but I would mainly sort of be in for the third eye and the throat, along with the root and the sacrum energy that's coming out here. And this is giving us like the vision to start applying our dream in the world in a very grounded way, in a very sort of solid way, as it were. Okay, let's just have a look at the sun and just see what's been going on over the past week. So here's the sun over the past week. You can see this corona hole that's going out of a view. There was that sunspot cluster. Oh, here we go back to the beginning. Sunspot cluster here and here that's been gradually going out of view. There's a few spots and spits and spurts that have been going on. Nothing really dramatic, I would say. And the last X flare that came off was off on that western limb there, on the eastern limb. The limb that's going out, and that started the sequence of air energy within the sun's energy, and it went from earth and water over the past sort of month or so into fire energy, and then from fire energy it's certainly gone into air energy. And there is some filament energies about, there is no doubt about it, and we do get some filament eruptions as well, but nothing really fantastic. As you can see, the departing sunspots there firing off. There's a few that fire off now in this section here with a filament energy that erupts on the southern part of the sun. And but it's bringing all the elements back into sort of stabilization more than anything else. And that coronal hole, let me just bring that back. That coronal hole, that the small one that was at the top, had a lot of potential, but as you can see it, this is that main corona hole that's going out the view. And you'll see here, there's another corona hole that sort of like comes into play. Here it is here. But you can see it's surrounded by sunspots and also filament energies, and that's been keeping it in check. So I think all the elements have really been keeping in check in regards to water, earth and fire, and it's allowing that air energy to flow through, which is all to do with the third eye and the throat chakra. And that section there where we're airing ideas and we're looking at things in a completely different way. You know, the change is formidable, that it's not only within the sun, but it's also within the earth, and everything seems to have taken a pause. And at this moment of pause, that's when we see things for what they really are, more than anything else. If you can just see here on this side here, right, okay, this is the LASCO telescope. Let's just see right at the beginning, as we see at the beginning, here it is. You can see all that sort of snowy stuff. That's from the last main X-flares eruption. Then you have another X-flare eruption. There it is there. That kicked off the air energy. There is a sight bit, as I said, comes through in this sort of section here, but it's really the air energy that's taking control of the situation. Nothing really directed within our direction. So it's incredibly calm. If we just look at the D layer from last week, which is this section here, look at the poles that have been lit up by those X flares, and then we've got this week's here, which is it's very much more calmer, very, very much more calmer. And that calm has actually been expressed, as I said, through earthquakes, but also through through volcanoes, but also through hurricanes. And that's that water, that air, fire and earth energy, with the water mixed in with lots of rain and so forth. And I do think that we're going to get a lot more rain over the next sort of month or so because of that input of that solar flare. It will eventually provoke and convert that air that is in the system at the moment into water. So you may see an increase of flooding in the next sort of like 10 days in both the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere as well. And that's the delayed effect of the X flares, or the fiery energy that comes through, that activates a lot of things within our system. But it does also sort of play into the idea when I was sort of saying the sun is back onto, or the earth, sorry, is back onto plan of getting on with doing what it's supposed to be doing, and that is pole shift. And we saw that in the messages from energy last week. Let me just show you the ISWA that is coming through at the moment. And as that comes through, you'll be able to see what's going on in the space energy, but you'll be able to see how the energy is actually breathing. So here is the ISWA over the last week, as you can well see. Here is the plasma density, and this is the speed of the wind. And they sort of go opposite to one another. As you can see here in the top section here, you can see on the Earth it goes up and then goes down. And as it goes up and it goes down, you get the opposite effect on the plasma. So as the plasma comes down on the Earth, it's actually as the plasma goes up on the Earth, you get the wind speed that goes slightly down as well. But one thing I wanted you to notice here is on this section here, just as we come through those flares recently, look at the deepness of the blue. It's almost like the sun has been split into two, like a yin and a yang of one side and the other. And if you notice on this left hand side just here, it will give you the intensity of the plasma, and deep blue is the lowest intensity. This, because of the lowest intensity, things can, there's nothing really blocking, it's not carrying a lot of weight. So the energy can actually go quite quick. And as we see at the beginning here, once it pulls back into place, you can see this redness that comes through here. And this is this whole breathing factor of the Earth. The Earth is coming back to a breathing motion of kind of going plasma taking on air speed taking on. And this is like, it's like increasing that air energy that's coming out of the sun at the moment because there's nothing in the way to stop it. So it's building a lot of that air energy. And it can be a little bit frustrating sometimes because we have ideas, but so by the end of the week you may feel like you've got a lot of ideas, but how do you get them done? And it's finding that constructive energy to help us convert the ideas into reality. But at the moment, as I talked about it last week and the week before, this great understanding of seeing the world as it is. And I did the 2025 readings on the Astroflower. If you haven't seen your weekly reading, we do that on the Thursday and the Friday over on the Astroflower. And I talked about it for this coming year of being the year where the truth comes to the surface. And I feel that this is what's happening at the moment within every aspect of life. And a lot of people are talking about it now, of being the year of truth. And it is the year of truth. And with that truth, it's a question of what are we going to do with it? That's the main thing. That what are we going to do with it? And as I said, the Earth is basically saying, okay, well, I'm going to get back to what I know best, and that's all to do with my with pole shift, as it were, with the pole shift energies, and so that seems to be the thing that's coming through from the Earth's energy, and it's also, it's within the solar system as well to go through that sort of pole shift. And ultimately, that means us as well. And it means about putting our thinking a little bit, turning it completely upside down. And we're going to look into that in a minute within regards to the polar vortexes of the wind of the northern and southern poles, and how they've been moving as well. But it is within us. It's the same thing with 3i Atlas. We've had, we're looking at things saying, oh, this is not sticking to the traditional models, therefore it's got to be a spaceship. Maybe it's just a fact that we don't know everything. How about that? I think that's pretty straightforward. And now we're moving into pole shift. We're now seeing the world completely upside down. Things are working in completely the opposite way of what we would normally be working in. And it seems that way more than anything else. Okay, so let's just have a look at that pole shift factor that's going on. Let's just have a look. We looked at these last week. Here you have on the left-hand side, you have the northern polar vortex, and the left, on this side here, you have the southern polar vortex. Now, the southern polar vortex is obviously a little bit stronger this time of year as they go into sort of through their spring period. It's now going to be releasing, and the energy is going to be moving gradually back up towards the north. And that's where we can see the activation of that. Now, if you look at what's going on the northern and southern poles, the magnetic poles, here you see on this side here, as the magnetic poles come through, the northern pole here, it's racing away from Canada and racing towards China, Siberia and China. And look at what's happening on the polar vortex. There's a massive section of the polar vortex which is developing a lot more over China and Siberia. You do have a little bit of an aspect here, and I think this is systematic, that pole that is gradually moving towards going right down to the Filipino plate, just east of the Philippines and of Vietnam and etc. That's where the poles are going to meet, but they don't actually meet like that. What happens is, if you can see on this side here you go, you've got South America here, and I was talking about this the other day, it gets pulled in that direction because that's where the energy lines are, which you can see on my map, and of the poles, the North Pole and the South Pole, and it's being pulled in that direction. It's making that sort of section there really important, but it does make this section here also important because we got the opposite side to it. And it's being pulled, and I've got to be saying, it's being pulled up this way. Why is it being pulled out that way? because of the South Atlantic anomaly. And what happens is the North Pole goes over like that, and the South Pole actually comes through the South Atlantic anomaly, and it will gradually meet to the surface as it flows through itself. So it's like a donut that's going within itself rather than just switching like that. It's a donut, and the South Pole goes through the Earth and meets the North Pole, and it will be meeting the North Pole at the Filipino plate. And another thing you might be able to notice is after 1869 of the or 1859 of the Carrington event, all of a sudden the poles got activated and started that real pole shift in earnest. And you can see down here how the North Pole, is really picking up with loads of speed as it heads towards China. And the same thing going on here in South America, in the South Pole, heading towards Australia in a way. But I think eventually it will just get sucked back into itself and pulled all the way back through, as it were. It may even be a fact that the South Pole may actually disappear. Or we think it's disappeared, but it's actually gone into the center of the Earth and will come out and join the North Pole. And that will ignite the magnets, which will flip everything within seconds to the North being the South and the South being the North. Things will still work, just work in the opposite direction more than anything else. A bit like a light does, more than anything. Okay, so I think that's coming out within the system. So we've got this massive calming down at the moment within the energies, a void of energies. And that void is really important because transition is nothing if we don't have that moment of recognition of the transition we've been through. And as we go through that switch from one thing to another, that's why transition happens. If we're permanently going through change, in theory, you change from one thing to another or go from one place to another. And if we're constantly going through change, we're not actually going anywhere. We're just wandering around like headless chickens. And I think this is where the consciousness is coming into play, because the sun is conscious, the earth is conscious, the whole system is conscious. It may not necessarily have the same consciousness as the sun as we have as a consciousness, but it's conscious all the same, and it would have a much completely different consciousness to what we have of the idea of consciousness. But we all play into it together. We all fit together. Everything is connected. So this week here, enjoy that space. Enjoy that moment of breathing and absorbing the energy and the calmness and the breathing of the earth as well. And we'll probably see that in the messages from energy tomorrow on the Astroflower. So enjoy your week. Obviously, if things change, because it can change very quickly on the sun, as you all well know, you will be notified here. If you want to be notified, you're going to have to subscribe, all of that. It's it's beautiful to see your comments, liking and sharing and all of that, because it really does help us with the algorithm and so forth. I'll see you either on one of those extra energy updates or the messages from energy or your local readings on the Astroflower on our sister channel. So I will see you soon. In the meantime, thanking you very much for being here. Hope you get the best out of all of these videos. In the meantime, don't forget, life should be fun, so please do enjoy.